Welcome back to the Better Sex Podcast. My name is Deborah Catt, and I am your shameless host. This podcast is where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationship. These conversations are frank and explicit and may not be appropriate for all audiences, so please listen with care. I truly believe that a sexy world creates a happier and a safer world. If you want to do your part to create a safe and sexy world, please hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Today, we are going to dive into the world of my guest, Evelin Dacker, MD. She is a Mexican-American family physician specializing in sexuality, menopause, and sexual health. She promotes an open conversation about sex, pleasure, and consent through a somatic and trauma-informed lens. She is the creator of the Stars Talk, a safer sex framework centering around communication to enhance the quality of relationships and sexual awareness, and to elevate consent. And I'm going to add in pleasure because that's been a big part of our conversation. So welcome. I am so pleased to have you here. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk with you as well.
Thank you. And I mean, first question, how did you get here? How did sex and consent and pleasure all come together for you?
Oh, wow. A really long journey of, losing my own sexuality and not understanding why. And through the deconstruction of like, why am I not enjoying sex the way all my friends enjoy it? What's wrong with me? And then knowing like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be menopausal and it's all going to go away. And at that point, I kind of had an idea of like, do I just say, fine, I don't like sex, menopause will happen, I have a good excuse? Or do I want to actually recognize that I want to liberate my sexuality? And so at that point, I chose to go down that path of really working at like liberating my sexuality. And, when you talked about shame free, that is such a big part of what got me here is really recognizing how much shame we have and how much we give control of our sexuality to others.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need to reclaim that back, especially as a person who was raised as a woman in a patriarchal society.
So I hear that often, but I'm wondering if you could break that down. Like, what does it mean to be a sexually active woman in a patriarchal culture?
Well, that's a really good question, especially because like that word patriarchy is so loaded with like, it's just a loaded statement. What does even patriarchy mean? Because it doesn't mean that men are better or women are better or when, it really means that like I think that the way that sexuality is determined for women is determined from this lens that places the male sexual pleasure primary. And for me, it was so much about responding to what they wanted, like what my partner wanted. And I began to only have pleasure by making sure my partner was having pleasure and not necessarily what I wanted. When I started, there was only one place that I enjoyed being touched, and that was like right here in my collarbone. Like every place else, I just didn't have any pleasure. And it was like, what is wrong with me? I didn't even know the way I like to be touched. So really about discovering that. And a lot of my Stars Talk, what I developed, this framework, a lot of it was developed through my own exploration and deconstruction and trying to figure out what is it that I like, and then being able to communicate that to others.
Thank you. So it sounds like what you're saying is the story that you grew up with was that pleasure wasn't necessarily for you, or if it was after your partner's pleasure. Did I get that right?
Yeah. And it was not like sold to me in those words, but just energetically and just the way I was raised Catholic from a Mexican mother, so my sexual pleasure was always like something I wasn't supposed to talk about or act on or discuss.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I like or that I've been noticing around when we talk about the culture of sexuality is it's really a culture for many of us about it's very transactional, right?
Mm.
It's introduced in the transactional way. For many people, for many of us socialized as women, it's like this, our virginity is
Mhm.
the prize, and our sexual submission, our sexual it's to be traded for protection and marriage and all of these other things. And I think we're at a really interesting time right now because it's like, as women, we're starting to have more power, we're starting to have more understanding. The men that I work with are certainly much more interested in, you know, the power of the women that they're with and also their pleasure. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious if that's something that you're noticing in your practice at all.
A little bit. So I notice it in my social realm. I definitely notice a lot more conversations with men who are actually like, wait, this doesn't always work for me. How do I show up for you? Right. And then people that I'm teaching my stars talk to, that's not just women, it's men wanting to hear, men wanting to also communicate with women. So I definitely see the cultural shift for some of us. I mean, I think there's also the whole traditional wife, there's the whole very conservative Christian, culture too, that I'm not speaking to.
Mhm.
But, in a more in a world, especially for so many women going through menopause, I mean, I really find that transition incredibly empowering because, like me, I do have a lot of patients who come to me and are like, I have no libido. What's wrong with me? How do I get it back? Or, and then concerned about it. And other patients who come to me and are like, oh, no, I'm glad I have an excuse now. So all of it, I understand because I was right there with them. And so men, men don't come to me. Some men come to me about libido, but then it's not really the same conversation as I have with women.
Well, so I'm curious, since we started talking about menopause, can you actually tell, like for people who aren't sure what it is, because it's a word that we use a lot and I don't find it's often actually defined. Would you kind of tell us what
Well,
is
well,
menopause?
yeah. Well, the actual term menopause means no period, and it's not actually not. It's like one day of your life, and it's a day of your life where you haven't had a menstrual cycle for 1 year. Now, some women have hysterectomies, some women have IUDs, and there's a lot of times when you don't know when that is. But there's a whole transition, which you could be anywhere from like 5 to 15 years, where our hormones stop going through that beautiful up and down pattern, the 28-day pattern, into something that becomes chaos. I kind of like to refer to it as like puberty in reverse. So, oh, yeah, that whole perimenopausal period could just make you feel a little crazy. It could bring out like those PMS that you've had, but almost exacerbate it.
Hmm.
And I think that this, in some ways, really promotes us going through this passage to really sit down and ask, like, what is it that I want for the rest of my life? Are these things that I tried so hard, does it really matter? Is it okay that I let my hair go gray? It's okay. Is it okay that I have wrinkles? Could I still be a sexual human even if I don't have that perfect body of a 30-year-old? So many times, all those hot flashes, all those night sweats, the sleeplessness, which are horrible and that can, be helped with hormones or other ways. Um, but they're also like, you get hot because you're probably pissed off for a reason. You know, you can't sleep because maybe there's a reason that's keeping you awake. Your anxiety gets worse. Well, maybe that's because the state of the world or the state of your relationship or your life is not where you want it to be. Now, I'm not saying that causes hot flashes and night sweats and all that awfulness, but sometimes our body gives us some signals for things to take care of and some signals to think about. For me, this whole thing with my change in my life started during my perimenopause. My kids didn't need me as much. I was in a long-term relationship and I was like, what is wrong? Why am I having these really heavy bleeding? Why am I not wanting sex? Like, what is going on? And it really made me question everything in my
Mm.
life, including my relationship. And that was the hard one. It's funny. I just want to say I've heard this being said that HRT, hormone replacement therapy, really stands for husband replacement therapy.
Oof. Oh my.
Because sometimes, and I've seen this, a lot of women in their 40s tend to be like, oh, this isn't the relationship I signed up for the rest of my life. It might have been the relationship I signed up for to have a family and children and get me here, but it's not what I wanted for the rest of my life. So sometimes during this period, it causes us to question ourselves and possibly take a look at our lives. And for many, really get into our bodies and get back into our sexuality and claim that and not believe that story that just because we're older and we can't have babies, that we're no longer sexual, that we're no longer desirable. Because really, that's not a story that makes sense anymore.
So it kind of makes me curious. I know we were talking a little bit before we hopped on, but you were talking a little bit about a menopause retreat. And what does that look like?
It was amazing. So we had 11 women and they were really, we called it Journey into the Wild Woman. And it was about reclaiming your authentic self. It's about going the perimenopausal journey to reclaim your essence, uninhibited essence that we all have. And the women were there from 42 to 71. So it really spanned a big age range. Women were there who were on hormones or questioning it or trying to do things naturally and really wanted information, but they also wanted sisterhood. And I found that that was so important. One of the things so I, after, this was a multi-day retreat, so this didn't happen right away. I led them into a meditation journey and exploration of what their vulvas look like. Because many women don't realize that our vulvas change as we go through menopause. And we're so disconnected from our sexuality and we're so disconnected from our own genitalia that just looking at ourselves is a almost radical act. It's like when I tell my patients, "Oh yeah, I had people looking at themselves." They're like, "Oh my God, I don't think I could do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I create, when you're in a safe container and if the container is held well, yes, you can do that." And so really this retreat was about reclaiming that and reclaiming, if you could be a goddess, what kind of goddess would you be? What would be your mantra? What are you, wanting to show up with in the world? And that's really how we get into this wild woman archetype that we all hold deep inside of us, and how the menopausal journey can be the catalyst for this.
Yeah, I was definitely hearing the word catalyst, opening. Um, so and then just to be really clear, because you use the word vulva, and I know some of my listeners are familiar, some of them aren't. Can you just break it down real quick?
Yeah. So the best way I could break it down is thinking about a woman's genitalia, the vulva's the face. It's what you see, right? So it's the labia, it's the lips, it's where the clitoris is. Deeper in, is the mouth, the mouth, we could say that. And that's the area where where the vagina enters and the urethra exits, where you pee from. And then the vagina would be kind of like your mouth and throat. So the vagina is the canal, but the external areas is the vulva.
Thank you. I know sometimes, people use that word interchangeably, and I love, first of all, I really like the word, and I like being more precise.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
which makes, I have the question, since you're a doctor, I'm going to ask, like, so what are some of the things that we should be asking our medical professionals about? And I'm going to ask that from the female bodied and also from the male bodied. Like, I saw a meme, something about, make it natural to start asking men about their reproductive health. And I love that. Because that's
Mhm,
definitely
mhm.
something, a conversation I have with my clients around, like, as we have more autonomy and, control over this, there's a certain confidence that comes with it. So what are some of the things that, people should be asking their health providers?
Well, I'll just say that as a healthcare provider, I'm the one who usually opens the discussion because I think especially with men have and I'm a female provider. So, I think men might sometimes feel a little inhibited to bring things up. So I often am the one, and I ask about pleasure. I ask about how's your pleasure? How's your intimate life? So I don't use words like, are you having erectile dysfunction? I ask about like, are they getting the pleasure and I ask everybody this, are you having the pleasure you want to have? Are you having the sex you want to have? Are you having any pain or discomforts? Or what are the changes? So that, if you have a provider that's really comfortable, this is what they'll ask you. I have to say, probably 99% of providers aren't going to go in that direction. So, what do you do? Okay. So, if you are a male bodied person, I think it's really important to bring up any changes that you've noticed. Like, oh, I noticed that I have to pee more and I'm getting up at night more to go urinate. Or I noticed that my erections don't stay as long as I would like them to. Or I notice that I'm feeling muscularly weaker and fatigued. That could be a sign of low testosterone, is fatigue and weakness.
Mhm.
And sometimes the first place you notice something going wrong, like high blood pressure or diabetes for a man, may be in their erections. Like all of a sudden, you're not having erections because you're having high blood pressure or high blood sugars. So, saying that to your provider is really important. I know it's hard sometimes to talk about that, especially if a provider is a female. I get that, but we are professionals, and this is our job. um, and, then there's also issues that may be more challenging to bring up, like premature, ejaculation. Yeah, your doctor's probably not going to know what to do about that, but you could always ask for your doctor for guidance and who could help them with something like that. For a female bodied person, noticing and bringing up if you're starting to have dryness, if you need to use more lubricant, when you're having sex or just in general, if you notice that you're having more pain and discomfort, one should not have pain during intercourse. That it just, our bodies are made to not have pain during intercourse. So if you're having pain during intercourse, that is something that really should be addressed with your provider. And, other things is, of course, the whole menopause, poor sleep, hot flashes, irritability, irregular bleeding, breast tenderness, feeling like your moods are all over the place. And it doesn't mean there's not anything wrong with you. That is just normal. And we can help you with that. A good provider can help you with that.
I'm curious, like, hearing you say that, what words of wisdom might you have for the partner of somebody who is noticing changes and, you know, um, in their partner? Like, what words of wisdom might you give them?
If they're, and I have some male partners, and again, because I ask, especially during their physicals, like, how's your intimate life? Are you getting, how's your pleasure? And I do have some of my men are like, oh my God, no, my like wife just doesn't want to be touched. She's cranky, blah, blah, blah. And then I tell them, well, this might be going on. There may be menopause and there's some help for that. She can get help for that. So you might just let her know that you talk to your doctor and, maybe she should get help from her physician on that. If it's a female who comes in and is like, wow, like my partner's libido is just really not good. What do I do? Or he's having more issues. Um, I also say, well, this could be a medical condition and really should be looked at to rule that out. If everything is normal, then you have to go a little deeper, as I'm sure you know, into the relational part. Like what's going on relationally with them. Because it's amazing. Sometimes people have no libido and then they have a new partner and woo, it's right up there from where it used to be when they were 16. So sometimes it's relational too.
And speaking of new partners, that seems like a really good place to start talking about the stars conversation. So, what is it, and when's a good time to start the conversation?
Well, the STARS framework, as I said, I developed it as I was recognizing my own sexuality and becoming more sexually aware. I went to this talk once by this sex educator, Reed Mahalko, who talks about like the safer sex elevator speech. And there was like 19 different things, but I was blown away by it. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Why doesn't everybody do this? I have to teach this to every single person I know, including all my patients. And I went home and tried to write everything down, and it was like too much. So I distilled it into 5 topics. And the acronym is STARS. So it's easier to remember. The first one is safety. And this is what I believe is like the basis of any healthy relationship, whether it's a hookup or leaning into a long-term relationship, or you're already in a relationship, is like, do you know what safety does? What safety means to you? Do you know how your body feels when it's safe? What makes you safe? Like, what do you need to feel safe in yourself and with another person? So, like a lot of these questions we have to think about for ourselves, and then be like, oh, I know that for me, I know that I need my partners not to be drunk. When I'm with a person who's intoxicated, I don't feel safe anymore. So that's part of my stars talk. I tell people like, I don't feel safe if somebody's intoxicated. So if you need to drink or want to drink alcohol, maybe we're not a good fit. And that's just one. So the first S is safety, because really that's the foundation for everything. You can't have good sex if you don't feel safe.
Right.
The second one is turn-ons, or the things that we like. Like what turns us on? What turns us on in a relationship? What turns us on sensually? What turns us on sexually? What turns us on intellectually, spiritually? I mean, it's so deep and rich, but like I learned that I like to be touched a certain way. And if I don't make that clear to my partners, then I'm playing this weird game with them when I'm in bed with them, trying to teach them I just much rather front load the conversation and then figure it out. So turn-ons is like what you like. Are you into kink? Are you into role playing? Are you into vanilla sex? Are you into like what do you enjoy? And it could change with different people in different periods of your life. So that's the T. The T is the things you like. The A is our avoids. And so these are our boundaries. These are the things that we don't want. These are the things that may trigger some trauma. These are the things that, you know what? Let me tell you up front that this is a boundary and this is important that you respect it so that we could learn attunement for each other. Our turn-ons and avoids are really a lot of that. And the safety, that's a lot of our consent conversation.
Mhm.
That's I refer to as trauma attuned consent, where we're attuning to each other and we're aware of our trauma, and it requires attunement, boundaries, and communication. Those are my ABCs of it.
And I just want to be really clear when you say attunement, what does that mean?
Thank you. Great question. That means that you are aware, present, and responsive to yourself and to the person you're with, engaging with. I think of it like dancing, right? Like if we're partner dancing, we need to be in this flow together and we need to kind of learn, but you have to learn it sometimes. Like you have to know, oh, when you push here in this shoulder, that means move in this direction. And oh, when I see, it's that all is learning attunement. So attunement is just being present with your own body and with somebody else's, and not getting into your own self and forgetting that they're there. And
Well,
that's, I feel, the way we actually create a healthy level of consent.
yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring into the what is going on in your body as well as your partners, because I think it's so easy to put our focus on our partners and lose what's happening over here.
Mhm. Mhm. So that's, so the first three part of the STARS talk is really about creating consent and communication and understanding boundaries and figuring out what you like. So then the R is is actually maybe the place that we start these conversations, and that's our relationship intentions and expectations, or in other words, our wants and needs. Who are we? What do we want? What are we looking for? Are we looking for a hookup? Are we looking for something long term? Are we looking for non-monogamy? Like, let's just be honest with each other. Let's be honest with ourselves and say, this is what I want. This is what I want, and this is what I want with you. If we have agreements with other partners, for those who are non-monogamous, this is a good place to bring that up into the R. And then, then it's our expectations or our needs. Like, what are our needs here? What do I need for aftercare?
Mm,
After I have sex, what do I need? Like, isn't that a great thing to talk about? Like, some people like to cuddle. Other people need to like rush to the bathroom and pee, and so like just saying, hey, this is what I need after sex. I love the concept of aftercare. And it also could be like, I need you to respond to my text within 2 hours. So there's all these little parts. So like if we just assume that we'll tell people or they'll figure it out, but what if we actually have these conversations before we get naked? Like,
mm.
what if we have these conversations as we're getting to know each other? Like, hey, let's have our stars talk. Let's make sure we just either do the bullet points or we take our time and really get to know each other and explore each of these areas. So I kind of feel oftentimes we start with that R, but rats does not sound good.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so it doesn't sound like so it sounds like, while we want all of the elements to be part of the conversation, that it doesn't necessarily have to follow there's no rules into how to have the conversation. So, what are some of the reasons that people don't have the conversation?
Well, then I'll go to the last S, which is probably some of the reasons either people have the conversation or don't. And that last S is sexual health and STIs. And I think that we have so much stigma around sexuality that a lot of it gets placed on STIs, that
Mhm.
we want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about STIs. We don't want to talk about the bad things that are going to happen. We don't want to talk about a lot of people will gloss over that. Oh, yeah, I've been tested, I'm clean, right? That's the not very good way of talking about it. I also think that it's just hard to talk about sex, especially when we have never been taught how to. And we say we're supposed to, but there's never been a framework or a way of doing it, which is what I'm hoping STARS does. I hope STARS puts a framework so people remember, oh, yeah, these are important things. And if I start talking about them, then it gets easier to talk about them. And the more people I talk about them with, it becomes easier for them to talk about it. I almost see it as a very, it has to have a ripple effect. we're uncomfortable talking about our desires. We're uncomfortable talking about what we like. We're uncomfortable talking about any sexual health issues we may have. Like, oh, I need to use lube. And one of the things that I teach this to a lot of people is like, if you're a person with a vagina, especially as a vagina gets older and you don't have as much estrogen, using things like spit as lubricant could actually increase the risk of bacterial infections and yeast infections. But I can't tell you how many times I have to remind somebody, no, please, here's the lube. Don't use that. Don't use spit. Here's the lube. So I make it very clear as part of my STARS talk and my sexual health is like, I don't use saliva. Saliva is a no. And I use lube and I love lube and let's normalize it. It doesn't mean, it's just a part of the sexual pleasure. It increases pleasure for both of us. But a lot of people don't know how to do that. They haven't been taught. They don't, it's scary.
Yeah, and it's funny as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, there's so many different kinds of lubes, right? And it's super important to actually test them and kind of figure out, like, take some time and figure out what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Fortunately or unfortunately, I've gotten the opportunity as a sex educator to try a lot of these things, and I've also noticed that sometimes I'll enjoy one kind of thing. Like for a while, I was really into this lube that had a heating um, thing to it, and then I was done with it. And so the different. Would you say there's anything in particular that one needs to look for when they're considering lube?
Yeah. Well, I'm a very big advocate of silicone lube. High quality silicone lube because it doesn't dry out. Water lube tends to dry out, and water lube could change the osmolality of the vagina and increase the risk for dryness and infections. So, if you're going to go for a water based lube, make sure it's a high quality one. Don't get it in the drugstore. And I don't like the heating ones because I feel like they have chemicals in them that aren't good for our bodies. I'm a big fan of silicone lubes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then for my male listeners, I'm curious, like, so one of the things that I always say is it's like, not all condoms are made equally in terms of size, in terms of texture. And so I invite them to, test them. And I'm curious if you have any words of wisdom on condom choices.
Yeah, internal condoms. Have you heard of internal condoms and used them?
Yeah, I have. It's been a while. Because yeah. So tell
Internal
more.
they're harder to obtain now because they have to be prescribed, unfortunately, and I won't get into that. It's yeah, but you can get them, you can get internal condoms. They take a little bit of there's a little bit of a learning curve with them, but I find them really nice, especially with men. I prefer them because um it doesn't I find like the size, a lot of men feel better with them. That feels more natural to them. They don't feel like there's anything constricting them.
Mhm.
And I also think it allows for a more natural sexual flow. Sometimes condoms are like, oh my gosh, I have it on. I have to make sure I orgasm and before I lose my erection. Um, but yeah, I think that there's all different sorts of condoms and different sizes and explore all of the different options. But don't forget about internal condoms because internal condoms are another choice and can be quite wonderful.
Yeah, I highly recommend them. I it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it, but I guess the reason I stopped using them was partly because you now need a prescription for them, and it hadn't. Uh, I'll put that back on my list of questions to ask to ask my medical provider.
Yeah, you just need a prescription for it, and it should be covered 100% by your insurance because all birth control is, and that's considered birth control. It's really, I'm going to just also promote, it's really, they're nice for people who are in non-monogamous situations. For like, if there's one man with two women and if he wants to go back and forth, he doesn't have to change condoms if they have an internal condom in. So there's place, and also for men, you could use them in an anus. You could use them for anal sex. Um, I've heard of gay men who like go to the bar and they put one in and they just have it in there so that they're ready if they're going to have anal sex. So it's an option that I think is often forgotten about.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing it back around. Um, yeah. So, and in terms of these kinds of conversations, one of the questions I had is, it's like, um, you know, what are the kinds of things like? So one of my providers was like, "Oh, let's take a baseline hormone check for you," and I didn't really know what that meant. And so, is that something that you do for your clients or your patients, or suggest they do?
Well, I do, because a lot of people want that. They want to know what's going on, and it gives information. I know the American Menopause Society, the ISWISH, which is the Institute for the Study of Women's Sexual Health, and I think the United States Preventive Task Service, nobody recommends doing baseline blood work. It's not necessary. We can't treat people just based on their symptoms. So if a woman comes in with bad hot flashes and night sweats, I really don't need to do blood work because I already know what's going on and I could just treat her. That being said, I often really like to get a baseline testosterone level, just because sometimes people need additional testosterone and we don't think about that. And it's not, I like to know, because again, a lot of women complain of low libido and they could use a little extra testosterone. So and because I do a testosterone level, a baseline, I often do all the other ones so that they could be, oh yeah, I am in menopause. Oh, right, my estrogen is low. Okay, well, it's not yet. So it just helps us give us some information, but it's not necessary to do blood work.
Thank you. So I wanted to come back to, we started talking a little bit about consent. We started talking a little bit about trauma. And I'm wondering, yes, this is a new conversation in terms of, I mean, I really haven't seen the consent conversation really entered into my life about 5 years ago. And so it's still actually, I think for many people, a new conversation. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the kinds of things that you want to add into specifically consent.
Yeah. Okay. So, consent is not one conversation. Consent is not one ask. Consent is an ongoing communication. And if I'm gonna use the stars talk as a model for doing this, it allows us to start that conversation from the very get-go of a relationship, right? We're going to start by saying, what do you like? How do you like to be touched? How do you like to touch people? Right? I mean, the whole thing. And by actually being curious and curious with oneself and curious with one another, we begin that conversation and create attunement with each other. So as I said, I call it like trauma attuned consent. So we have to have some awareness of our own trauma. If we carry, and I'm sorry, every single person in this universe, if you're human, you carry some sort of trauma. How does that show up sexually? For some people it does, for some people it doesn't. But if it does, it's important that we address that. And then being able to understand that consent is like, if we look at the Planned Parenthood model of like freely given, how could we really freely give our yeses and our nos if we don't understand what we really like and don't like, if we don't understand our own boundaries, if we don't understand what safety means and what safety feels like in our bodies? So, Thinking of the STARS talk as a model to help guide consent conversations as well as safer sex conversations, it just kind of is the whole package. And there's no, as you mentioned before, there's no right way of doing it. There's no like, if you have to do it bullet point by bullet point, it feels too formulaic. We
Hmm.
don't want it to be formulaic. And it could be done over time, and it could even be done when you're already in a relationship. I often do my STARS talk, once a year I had a partner for 5 years, and we would do our STARS talk every year just to be like, where are we at now? How have things changed?
I love that idea. I've been with my partner for 24 years now, and certainly we are very different people than we were in the beginning. And even though I have these conversations every day, all day, having that conversation with my partner is still edgy. It's
Yeah.
still like, um, it's so funny that but it still comes up, and so I love the idea of of doing it on a regular basis. So I know I'm very excited that you are really branching out with the Stars conversation, and I know that you were asked to go to New York, and I wonder if you'd like to tell us a little bit about that experience.
So one of the things that I'm really passionate with the STARS talk is to have it change culture and normalizing the conversation. So who needs this and learning it? Our youth. Everybody who I talk to as an adult who learns it is like, why didn't I have this when I was young? So I got invited to go to the New York Department of Health. It's like Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Interesting time, in New York City. And I got to present this to the Teen Connections program. So these were all the teen counselors and teen sex educators in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And I got to do this presentation with one of my colleagues named Courtney Brame, who is a herpes destigmatizer. So Courtney and I work together a lot because the STARS talk is one of these frameworks that could help people reduce the stigma and reduce the stigma of sexuality and reduce the stigma of herpes. So together we went, and I saw you light up when I said his name. You know him.
Yeah, I was checking out the summit that he they uh,
He.
he produced, and your collaboration there, and so really really smart guy, does great work, and I love that you guys are collaborators. That's so great.
Yeah, no, our work dovetails so well together, and I can't speak more highly of Courtney. He's a person with a lot of integrity and a lot of passion, and yeah, is a just overall great human.
Beautiful. So I know that and I love that you were getting to talk to the peer counselors, and um that's
And what was so exciting was as I was doing my talk, one of them was like, "Hey, I just taught my teenagers, this last week." Like, and look, the little hand goes up. I taught them that last week, and I was like, "Wow!" So people are hearing of it, and it's doing something. And I really hope that someday it is taught to young adults and to teenagers and in colleges so that they don't have as hard of a time navigating these conversations. And I really think like so many of the things that you hear go wrong between people, I'm like, gosh, if they only talked about things, that wouldn't have happened. If they only said, "No, I don't want to give you a blowjob on the first date," and then afterward they're like, "Oh, I was forced into doing something." Well, it's because we don't talk about things, we don't claim, and we don't, I hope it's a way of encouraging curiosity about one another.
I love that, and it's such a beautiful framework. So, in a moment, I'm going to ask you, like, if there was one thing that you wanted people to get out of our conversation, what might that be? But I'm going to take a moment first to let people know about how they can support the Better Sex podcast. Because, of course, a podcast, even as good as this one, um, is probably not enough information to really create the kind of sex that you want. And that's why I offer a bedroom breakthrough session. It's personalized, it's one-on-one experience, so that we get to discover what is holding you back. Because, as you know, my mission is to create a safer and sexier world. And one of the ways that I do that is through talking to people one-on-one. So I'm really excited that there's a link in the show notes. Please check it out. And on that note, I'm going to um, come back to you and say, what do you want people to get out of this conversation?
I really want people to get out that there is a framework out there that helps us have conversations around sexuality. And the more that we lean into communicating, the more we liberate our sex, the more we can have pleasure from it, the healthier relationships we have, and the more we learn about what consent means. So I think the one thing takeaway is the stars talk.
Beautiful, thank you. And where can people
Yeah.
find more about the Stars Talk? And I believe you have a book in the works. Is that accurate?
Yeah, right now, yes. People could find out more about the Stars Talk at maketimeforthetalk.com. It's make time for the talk. You can get there. And yes, the book, right now, the book is on hold because I've had a lot of other life changing things occur. But hopefully in the next couple of years, it will be out.
Beautiful. And on social media, you are.
And on Instagram, I am at SexMedDoc, and there's also at Make Time for the Talk. On Facebook, I am at my name, Evelin Molina Dacker, and you could find me there. And there's also, if you want more information, more about me and my work on menopause and sexual health and pleasure as a doctor, there I have it at evelindacker.com, and I'll be opening up a health coaching practice around sexuality called Wild Woman Wellness.
Ooh, I love
And
all that.
yeah, in the new year, in 2025, that'll be opened.
Yeah, and I highly suggest people check out the Instagram. Lots of really interesting, fabulous information and really vulnerable shares. And I just really appreciate that. So please follow her on social media and all the spots and check out The Talk. Maketimeforthetalk.com and practice the talk. Um, and it's funny. I was talking to. Speaking of the talk, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were actually kind of going through like, what would you say in these different things? So, and it felt really good to actually kind of know what I was going to say before I have a conversation with someone else. So anyway, back to I really want to thank you for joining me here today. And again, for those of you who are listening, if you want to bring more love and better sex to the world, please subscribe, like, and comment. And if you know someone who needs this information, please share this talk, this conversation widely and freely. And on that note, bye for now.
Hi, thank you.